Every day at Sierra, you'll find top brand apparel, footwear, and gear for 20 to 60% less than department and specialty store prices. And during clearance time at Sierra, those incredible prices are 40 divided by 2.5, carry the 1, even lower. And when you shop clearance at Sierra, you can save a whole lot more on everything you need to get active and outside. That's a lot of saving. Epic brands, vast selection, teeny tiny prices. That's Sierra. Visit your local Sierra store today or shop online at sierra.com.
Unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Welcome in. Happy Friday. Here are some of the topics we'll tackle tonight. Apple's App Store. It locks developers in. You can't sell anything on their platform without Apple's approval and without giving them a 30% cut. But should things be this way? One advocacy group is trying to get Apple to stop this behavior, but will they succeed? That is what we'll cover in 10 minutes' time. Then after that, everybody does it, nobody talks about it. This evening, we'll get scientific about why humans pass gas, what a toot says about your gut, why silent ones are deadly. Halfway through the hour, a gastroenterologist will teach you the biology behind your bodily functions. All right, that is some of what we'll cover tonight. That is some of what you'll learn. There will be more, but for now, let's dive in with tech stories of the day.
It is time for Technology Time. We are joined by tech analyst, tech expert, and friend of mine, Carmi Levy. Some people call him Random Access Carmi. Does anyone call you that, Carmi?
No, because that shortens to RAM Carmi, which quite frankly has some implications I really don't want to get into or have to explain to my wife. So maybe Random Access Carmi would work on its own.
All right. RAC, I think. Random Access Carmi. Never mind. Let's talk about this act that has been passed by the U.S. Senate. It's not signed to law yet, but it's basically trying to protect people with whom deep fakes create fake images of them, fake videos of them that are awful. We're talking like dark stuff, like pornographic, things like this, which I would want myself protected from that, even though I don't really care if anyone sees me naked. I don't want anyone to generate images of me and then, I don't know, blackmail my employer with them, or if I'm a young person, send them to all my college peers, or just people can do really awful stuff with this tech, and I do think there needs to be some protection.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ultimate nightmare scenario, and certainly we've seen it over the past couple of weeks, specifically with Grok, where, regular unsuspecting people are posting images of themselves, as people often do, to their X account, and then complete strangers are grabbing those images, running them through Grok, nudifying them, sexualizing them, putting them in bikinis or taking off their clothes, and then distributing them to their followers, at which point they go viral. So imagine that level of digital victimization. I mean, it's a form of virtual sexual assault, and you have no control over it as a victim. And so what this, it's called the Defiance Act, and it's probably the best acronym ever coined. It stands for Disrupt Explicit Forged Images and Non-Consensual Edits, for Defiance. And it was sponsored by a Democratic senator, and the Senate has now passed it unanimously. So everybody agreed this is necessary. It ensures that anybody who's been victimized by non-consensual, sexually explicit deepfakes of themselves, that they can take civil action against the people who have done so. So it at least gives victims an opportunity to level the playing field, to seek some kind of justice against these cretins who are doing this online using AI image generators like Grok to persecute this kind of crime.
Now, it's weird. They're being kind of technical about it. They're not saying the very generation of it is the problem. It's like the hosting of it. Could I use this act? Suppose someone did something awful like this to me. Could I use some mechanism on X or Twitter? I'm still calling it Twitter. I don't care.
Twitter forever.
To cause them to then immediately take down the post? What would the mechanism be for me? Can I just sue? Because that seems really difficult. The average person doesn't have access to a lawyer and a lawsuit. Is it sort of like a Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown? Which, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, that's like if a pirated video gets posted to the internet or some copyrighted content gets stolen, I can just submit to YouTube and say, hey, that song that someone added to their video is mine. Please take it down. I don't have to go to the courts to do it necessarily. Is it more like that?
It's kind of like it, and what it does is it works in concert with legislation that was already on the book. So that piece of legislation was known as the Take It Down Act, and that was passed earlier last year. And that requires the platforms to remove the content when asked to do so. So it doesn't stop the content from showing up in the first place. And I think it'll still occur. Tools like Grok can continue to exist. They will have no guardrails preventing this kind of thing. The law doesn't compel them to put those guardrails in place, but it at least gives options both to victims to have it to go after perpetrators with civil action, and it also, in concert with the Take It Down Act, requires the platforms like X, like Grok, like OpenAI, like anyone, to remove the content once they become aware that it's there. So a little bit more protection now than we've had previously. Still doesn't address the root cause of the problem because those image generators are still there, and there's still no law that requires image generators to explicitly stop these kinds of assets from being created in the first place. So if Elon Musk decides to remove the guardrails, they've said that they're going to prevent Grok from doing so in future in response to this latest controversy. If they decide at some future point in time to remove it, there's nothing in law that sanctions them accordingly. And that's a bit of a problem. It means we still have a ways to go in terms of putting laws in place. And of course, this is only in the U.S. North of the border in Canada, there's really nothing equivalent. And so if you really want to continue to perpetrate this kind of crime, you just move to Canada and keep on keeping on.
Ooh, I do have a Canadian passport, but this sort of crime is not interesting to me.
No, but now you said it on air, so now they're watching. So
now, on the one hand, we've got the Senate passing a law that seeks to maybe curb Grok or Elon Musk's X's AI thing. It's probably the most off the rails, widely available AI product offered by a large company. On the one hand, they're potentially curbing some of the behavior of this AI bot, or at least what happens to content generated by it. But then on the other hand, in the U.S. government, we go to the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War or whatever. They're announcing they want to use Grok AI into military software. So, which one is it? Are they going against Musk? It's like they don't know what the left hand and the right hand are doing.
They don't seem to know how to read the room. I mean, on the one hand, you have Grok going off the rails and being rightfully spanked for it. And countries around the world are, for example, Indonesia and Malaysia, they are banning Grok now because of this controversy. And then the U.S. Essentially saying, okay, we know that Grok is problematic, but we're going to put it on all of our systems at the Pentagon by the end of the month. So Defense Secretary...
What could go wrong?
That's exactly. Yeah. What a great idea. So Pete Hegseth has said he wants to integrate Grok into the Pentagon's networks by the end of the month. And that includes every unclassified network and more troublingly, every classified network throughout the Defense Department. He says it's part of their AI acceleration strategy, which is basically use AI to remove barriers, unleash experimentation, focus on investment, blah, blah, blah.
I don't want that in military software.
That's the scary thing, is that, architecturally, Grok we know is problematic, and now you're going to combine that without a whole lot of due process here. It's not like they studied this for years to make sure that it was safe, or that it would ensure that classified military American data wouldn't end up in the wrong hands or wouldn't be shared in some way with, let's call them bad actors. So the checks and balances, the protections for this, what is essentially the most sensitive of all data, just simply aren't there. And the fact that it's Pete Hegseth, oh my God, just no. I mean, the headlines for this are already being written now, and it's only a matter of time before we see the first scandal blare because of this. This is just one of those bad ideas that, quite frankly, smarter people in the room should have stopped, but for whatever reason, they didn't.
I'm just thinking classified information and the most notorious AI model for not having guardrails. You mix those together, I don't see it getting good results, I gotta say.
I find it amusing that before the U.S. went into Venezuela, they specifically did not inform anyone in Congress. So on the congressional committees that oversee the military, they were not advised. And what was the excuse was because they were worried that there were leakers there. Never mind that all these people on these committees, all these elected officials, have national security clearance, and it's been done in the past. There have never been leaks associated with them in the past. And now they're willing to, so they're so worried about leaks, but now they're just going to layer over Grok on top of very sensitive Pentagon technology infrastructure, and they think that there are no leaks at all. That to me is just unreal.
When we come back, we'll talk the advocacy group trying to break up Apple's
App Store. You know, you can only download apps if they're blessed by Apple through their App Store platform. That's called a walled garden. That's basically a software operating system that's locked down. And there's a group that wants to potentially get rid of that. I think it'd be great news for the consumer, but will it happen? That's what we'll discuss with Carmi Levy in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Get your snack on for less with wowza deals at Food Basics. Find select varieties of Dare cookies or crackers for just $1.98 each. Shop in-store and online until January 21st. Food Basics, always more for less.
We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The last show with David Cooper.
Apple's App Store. If you want to install software on your phone or on your iPad, you have to use it. You may not think much about that, but what that means is Apple has to approve everything you install on their platform. A platform that does that is not an open one. And there are people that would like this platform to be open. There are app developers who don't want to have to pay Apple a cut to put their software in their app store. And that's what we're going to discuss here with Carmi Levy. There's a group in Canada that seeks to break up the app store. Carmi, welcome back to the show.
Good to be back. Yeah, this is a story that's been festering for a very long time. Almost as long as app stores have existed, there's always been this push by developers, smaller organizations, smaller companies, possibly competitors, who essentially say that they bristle at Apple's imposing of those rules that they say prevents competition, prevents consumer choice, lowers quality, increases prices. And now this they're called the Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic, and they filed an application with Canada's Competition Tribunal, basically saying Apple's dominance is harming the market. It's harming developers, it's harming consumers, it renders them with less choice, and it also puts up barriers to anyone else who would want to get into the market, because Apple's rules are so stringent that they essentially form a block to anyone else who wants to come in. And they are saying they would love for Apple's App Store to be broken up completely. Kind of a bold move because, you know, this is Apple. But at the same time, I think they're sending a message.
Walk me through what it would look like if the App Store was open. For example, Google's platform, they've got an equivalent App Store-like thing. I don't even know what it's called. The Play Store, I believe is what it's called.
Google Play, yeah.
But if you are a software developer and you want to release stuff and not go through Google's platform, you can still do it. It's a bit tricky. It's called side loading or whatever. I kind of get it. And so it's sort of the best of both worlds. Google gets to have their walled garden. They get to approve everything, blah, 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 just like Apple. But if I, an owner of a phone, really want to install something that doesn't do that, I can still do it. With Apple, you can't do that. I know I just asked you what it would look like and then described what it would look like. But tell me what a world would look like where Apple wasn't so locked down.
So, I mean, I think the reason Apple has given for its approach to this relative to Google's is that it wants more control over the user experience.
Over the money, Carmi, over the money.
Oh, of course it is. That's the quiet part. And we're saying that out loud. But the quiet part is, or the not so quiet part is that Apple says it's concerned about security. It's concerned about bad actors getting malicious code into Apple's ecosystem, which would ruin kind of the integrity of the iPhone, the iOS, the iPadOS platforms. And so that's been Apple's excuse. But of course, if you're a developer, you got to pay your 30% cut to Apple. And there are very specific rules about what you can and cannot do. For the longest time, you couldn't put links in your App Store entry. And so you couldn't direct customers to your website, for example. You couldn't set up your own payment system. You couldn't do in-app payments. And if you did, Apple could very well ban you from the platform. And it did so many times. Remember what happened with Fortnite when Apple and Epic were engaged in this battle. Epic set up a paid, a separate payment system. Apple banned them from the App Store. Next thing you knew, they were spending years in court. So that's really that's what's at issue here, is that Apple makes rules that it says are required for the integrity of their environment, whereas competitors say, no, it just blocks us and it hinders competition, hinders innovation, and it essentially kills our business and doesn't allow anyone else to get a leg up. And so it's the existential question. Do you believe Apple? Do you believe the outsiders who say that those rules should be loosened, in a more Google-like way? And so, as the Competition tribunal looks at this, it's going to be asking those questions and bringing those stakeholders in to, share their piece. And obviously, 180 degrees apart, hard to tell who's going to win, but it's an important conversation to have because this is how the digital economy works, at least today. Might change tomorrow, but at least for now, this is how we get stuff done on our phones, and this is how the money flows.
Well, if you think about desktop or laptop operating systems like Mac OS or Windows, if I want to install some software and pay a software distributor on by doing so, let's think like Photoshop or any app where you have to pay money for it, Microsoft and Apple get 0%. They get no cut. This is an open system. I can install whatever software I want, and they get 100% of whatever I pay. If I do it on the phone, Apple's taking a 30% cut. What, just for the pleasure of listing it on the App Store? That's insane. And there's nothing stopping them from next year turning it up to 35%, 40%, 90%. It's just made up and it's totally monopolistic. And I get Apple saying, okay, we want to have consistency on our platform. We want to guarantee safety, blah, 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 blah. But that cut seems so arbitrarily high. And for what, Carmi?
Because Apple says that it's like it built the playground, so it gets to make the rules. It crafts the infrastructure, it pays for it, therefore it takes what it says is a reasonable cut of the proceeds. Of course, if you're on the other side of that equation, you have a very different opinion. And so I think it's a reasonable argument to be made that the world has changed since the App Store was first set up, and that all the cards now sit in Apple's hands, and maybe that's not necessarily the most fair way to go about it. The problem that I see here is that, who is the Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic? And does Canada's Competition Tribunal have the power to impose this change on arguably the world's most powerful technology company, using an app store that, quite frankly, has become the standard for how we get apps onto our smartphones and tablets? That's a pretty big lift for just the competition tribunal to have, and I kind of wonder where this is going to go. Makes for a great headline, but legally, economically, would this stick globally? I just don't see it happening.
I don't, unless the U.S. regulators come down on Apple for their monopolistic practices with the App Store. I don't see it happening.
And exactly, and given politically sort of the change that we've seen in the relationship between Washington and Silicon Valley over the last year or so, I just don't see that happening anytime soon. I think the interest is in maintaining the status quo, at least until technology renders this entire argument obsolete. When AI takes over a lot of those workflows, instead of downloading apps onto our phones to get stuff done, we'll simply, as you can do in ChatGPT today, we'll simply tag their partners to get things done. And at that point, the notion of downloading an app becomes very quaint indeed.
We got a couple minutes, but I want to stay in Canada here to the internet regulators. They're the same organization that prevents me from swearing on the radio, the CRTC.
Darn.
Sort of. Darn. Sort of the CRTC. There's another thing called the Canadian Broadcast Standards. You know what? I'm not going to get into it. Okay.
CBSC.
There's a new rule saying that streamers, like Netflix, Amazon, this sort of thing, they have to disclose certain financial things in Canada, and streamers are really upset about this. Walk me through it.
So this is part of the Online Streaming Act, which of course is now law in Canada. And so the CRTC is trying to figure out, well, how do we determine when Netflix and Amazon show a movie or a TV show on their services in Canada, how do we figure out if it's qualifies as Canadian content? And radio's been dealing with this for decades, of course. They're taking that CanCon regulation and they're carrying it forward, trying to modernize it for the streaming era. And one of the things they want streaming companies to do is share some information on everything that they produce. So like if you produce a TV show or a movie, you have to share details on what makes it Canadian, right? So where's the director from? Where are the actors from? Where was it filmed? And just as importantly, what are the financial statements attached to these projects? And that's where the streamers are pushing back, and they've sued the federal government. They're in the Federal Court of Appeal, and they're essentially saying, we do not want to share our financial information with you. That would affect our competitive position. Why would we want to do that? And so you have a government that wants to update CanCon rules. You have streaming companies that have been saying all along, we don't want to pay you. We don't want to adhere to your rules. The Canadian government doesn't get to push us around. And now they're suing them because they're asking for financial data. Yet another big battle between big government and big tech, and on the streaming front.
We'll see what happens there. I guess these companies mostly operate out of the U.S., and so they're just going to kind of use that as a way to maybe shirk the responsibility in Canada. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, they just want to collect revenue from Canadians. They don't want to pay back into the economy, and they certainly don't want to get bogged down with bureaucratic overhead, which includes, pulling together information and sharing it with Ottawa. So this just continues a trend we've been seeing for a very long time.
Carmi, it was a joy having you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate being with you. Thanks so much, David.
After the break, we're talking about passing gas, what it's made of, why it happens, and why those awkward toots can tell you something about your gut health. Also, I've got a question. Why do those hot ones stink? I swear, this is educational, and it's coming up next. You won't want to miss it.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Please be advised that the following program contains audio content that may be graphic and potentially triggering for some listeners. This content may include descriptions or sounds that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
We laugh when it happens. We blush. We might blame the dog, but everybody farts, and it turns out farting can be a serious science. I am joined by a gastroenterologist and a professional fart demystifier. You can check her out on social media where she records great videos at SoCal GastroDoc. Her name is Dr. Wendi LeBrett. Dr. Wendi, it is a joy to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I got to ask the big picture question here from a medical perspective. And for any regulators listening right now, Dr. Wendi is a gastroenterologist, so we've met our burden for science, so this isn't inappropriate. What is a fart actually made of? And what part of that mix makes the smell so, looking for a word here, memorable?
Lethal is the one I use.
Good.
Memorable is also good. So it's basically you're just getting rid of excess air in your digestive tract, and it needs to go somewhere. So either you burp it out or it comes out as a fart. And the smell is primarily due to sulfur containing compounds, hydrogen sulfide, and that is made by the bacteria that break down certain types of food in your gut.
Is a particularly lethal one a sign of bad health? Is it a sign of that bacteria doing a bad job, or is it just everyday business?
It depends how often it's happening. I think, certain foods that you eat can cause that bad smell. Some people notice that more with beans, for example. But there is some science that people who have particularly lethal smelling farts and consistently are having that could be a sign of dysbiosis, so imbalance of bacteria in your gut.
Let's talk about some of those things that can cause that lethal smell. I've noticed, and I feel like people don't talk about this. They talk about beans, but they don't talk about shallots. I've noticed when I cook with shallots, things go off the rails in the bed at night.
Yeah, so there's also certain kinds of foods called FODMAPs. So these are types of carbohydrates that are highly fermentable. And so shallots, garlic, pretty much all sorts of onion, broccoli, cauliflower, these are other common offenders.
The big question, and the video that I saw of yours that really wanted to get me speaking to you, silent ones that are deadly, and then the loud ones that embarrass you, but no one really smells anything. Why is there such a difference between these two categories?
Yeah, so the loud ones are typically made out of gases such as hydrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So it's really from swallowed air. So as you're eating, you swallow a certain amount of air. So if you drink a carbonated beverage, there's air in there, and then those gases need to come out. And those are usually large volume gases. So there's a lot of that gas. And when there's large volume moving from a small little hole, then that causes a vibration, and that causes that loud noise. The silent ones, typically small volumes, so small amounts of gas being produced by whatever fermentation of food in your gut. And then it's just a tiny little bit of air that escapes, but that is very memorable in smell, to use your language.
Now, the hot fart, which is often silent, I feel like those ones are the worst. They come out and it's like you feel the warmth and it's like, oh no, I hope no one breathes through their nose right now. Is there a science behind that? Is that because they stay in your stomach for longer or long enough for the gas to heat up?
So I have to say, I have not thought too much about the heat, although I do find that the hot ones come with the silent ones. So my suspicion is that the hot ones there's extra heat created by that fermentation process. So that bacteria, when they're producing that gas, they use energy, and part of that energy is produces heat. So hot and silent.
Good. All right. That is a question my girlfriend really wanted to know. Shout out to her. Okay.
Is it because of your farts or her farts?
Hers. And so I do want to, speaking of hers, she grew up in a household where there was a lot of fart shame. People claim to never fart. You, on the other end, are someone out there, you've learned about this, you educate about this, you see patients about this. Talking about it's good, right? If we don't talk about our bodies, how can we monitor their health?
Absolutely. Yeah. My whole goal of my social media platform is to normalize the uncomfortable conversations about poop, farting, your burping, digestive systems, because if you don't talk about it, you don't know it's a problem, you don't know what's normal, and you don't know when to get help for it.
Now, people who try to hold it in and just to pretend that they don't and always are stressed and I imagine their stomach's really under high pressure and they keep those muscles tense and all this kind of stuff. First of all, they must be lying because everybody does. Second of all, is that healthy to just hold it in all the time?
No, I think it's better to let it out. If you need to let it out, excuse yourself, go to the bathroom and do it. If you're somewhere where you feel comfortable letting it out, then please do whatever you like. So whenever patients see me, often it's for a colonoscopy and they need to fart and pass the gas after the colonoscopy, and they are always very embarrassed about that. And so I always tell people that's part of the process. We expect you to fart, and so don't be embarrassed about it.
Sometimes we're in public, and I have IBS, so side note, ladies, I'm taken. But it'll be at a restaurant or on the subway or something, and my girlfriend will smell an offensive smell, and she'll give me that look, and I'll say, it wasn't me. And you know how we know it wasn't me? First of all, I never lie about this stuff. Second of all, it's not my brand. Is that a real thing? Do people have specific brands? My mom always talked about having a brand, which is like a distinctive smell that belongs to only that person, and then you might get another offensive smell that a person may never make or claim not to ever make.
Yes, I think that really fits with the idea that your gut bacteria is very individualized to you. And so they make probably whatever composition of them makes some specific type of smell and composition of the certain gases. So I think everybody probably does have a certain brand, and interesting that you and your girlfriend can identify yours.
That's what love is, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, true love.
Now, you mentioned the gut bacteria being specific to individuals. Is it as unique as, I don't know, my nose or my eyes or my voice? Does each individual really have a gut bacteria or gut flora that's specific to them?
Yes, I would say it's as individualized as your fingerprint. And, that's still something it's a very hot topic nowadays. And we know our gut bacteria doesn't just affect our digestive system, it affects pretty much our overall health. But we're still learning about how to tease out that individuality of our gut bacteria.
How important is your gut bacteria health to you? I've heard it described as the forgotten organ because it's not like you, the cells aren't your DNA, they're not, but yet it's in there in your body. And if it's unhealthy, you're unhealthy.
Yeah. And if you're healthy, that can help promote healthy gut bacteria too. So the things you do can also impact our gut bacteria. But we know that it affects our digestive system, certainly, but also there's links with obesity, mental health, alcohol use disorder, all sorts of different things can be impacted by our gut bacteria.
Dr. Wendi, we are going to enter the fart facts portion of the interview. Are there any things that still surprise people when you tell them things that seem normal to you because you're a gastroenterologist, but people just don't know?
So there's a normal amount of times to be farting. There was another video on social media where somebody tried to scare their followers and say, oh, if you're farting too much, that's a sign that there is an issue with your liver. So that's not true. And so I actually debunked that video, told people, actually, farting 10 to 20 times a day, that's within the range of normal. Lots of people then commented and...
That seems low, Dr. Wendi.
Yeah, so whatever, 10 to 20 times, that's within the range of normal. So don't feel bad about it.
But 100 to 200, is that too high? I'm starting to worry here.
That probably is a little bit on the higher end.
Oh boy,
yeah.
It looks like I'll be making an appointment with you. Any misconceptions that people have about gas and digestion that you encounter?
I think a lot of people tell me about gas pain and they were like attributing things to gas pain. And certainly that can cause symptoms. But, I think it's important to investigate and make sure that that's the only thing that's causing your symptoms.
Well, you can follow Dr. Wendi LeBrett at SoCal GastroDoc on social media. Wendi, or Dr. Wendi, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
In a few moments' time, your sleep. People tell you to get the right number of hours every night. I've heard that, you've heard that. But what if getting enough sleep isn't the point at all? Well, a new study suggests it's waking up in the night, fragmented sleep, not fewer sleeping hours that may slow your brain down the next day. Why? We'll teach you the answer to that in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Where intellectual honesty gets witness protection from social prosecution. The last show with David Cooper.
We are told to chase 8 hours of sleep every night, but what if that is not quite the right goal? Well, there's new research on older adults that finds broken, fragmented sleep, not short nights, can slow mental processing the next day. A night slept the whole way through might be better than 8 hours all broken up. I'm here with Dr. Orfeu Buxton, a professor of biobehavioral health at Pennsylvania State University, to discuss just this. He's done research in this area. Orfeu, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Good evening. I hope you slept well.
Thank you, Orfeu. I did, but maybe it was a bit fragmented last night. So let's get into the weeds here. When we say sleep fragmentation, I think it makes sense to most people, but what does that actually look like in the bed? Is it tossing and turning? Is it waking up briefly? Is it something else entirely?
Well, everyone wants to feel restored after they slept, not tired and exhausted still, but sharp, ready to go. And so one way that you know your sleep was disrupted or way too short is that you don't have that sense of that the sleep was restorative. How people experience that can vary, and it can vary night to night. Tossing and turning is a good way to put it. Those can be for long stretches or frequent interruptions during the night, either internally generated by thinking and waking up to something or disruptions from the environment.
I can't tell you how many times I've woken up covered in sweat, worried that I missed the start time of my show. Stress dreams, waking up, and then my cat bothers me at night, and then I hear a noise. Maybe it's the heater going off. I'm guilty of sleep fragmentation if I'm behaving the way that I just described.
Pets, especially cats, are not advised for sleep. They're not on the same schedule. They kind of don't care if you're getting good sleep or not. Might have to work on that.
You just picked a huge fight with my partner, my girlfriend. She likes to sleep with the cat. Okay, the big takeaway, how you sleep mattering more than how long you sleep. This goes against most wisdom I've heard.
So we think they're all important, right? So the actual advice is to get 7 or more hours a night on a regular basis. And it seems like the regular basis is maybe doing even more work. It's sleep is a habit, just like exercise and diet. You don't have 3 salads and wake up lean. You don't go to the gym for 6 hours and wake up The Rock. Sleep is a habit. And so you need enough of it. It needs to be on a regular basis. But what we're showing here in this study in older adults is that it needs to also be relatively unbroken. So if you have very long interruptions or frequent interruptions, your cognitive performance is a little less than preferred.
Let's talk your study. What exactly did you look into? How do you set up an experiment like that?
Yeah, so this is very different from the controlled laboratory studies where we know that cognitive performance is influenced by how much you slept last night, the last week or two, how disrupted it was. This was looking at the role of day-to-day sleep in cognitive function in older adults in a real-world setting. So they were sleeping in their own bed, going about their usual daily activities. They had a sleep watch on their wrist for a couple of weeks. And during the day, they did 6 brief brain games every day. And those brain games are on a study phone app, and they can evaluate various characteristics of cognitive processing, memory, processing speed, and so forth. So we did this in several hundred older adults in their 70s and 80s in Bronx, New York, as part of the Einstein aging study. And we examined multiple aspects of sleep, so duration, timing, quality, disruption, those kinds of things. overnight, and how day-to-day sleep influences cognitive performance the next day, and also on average, short sleep or lots of disruptions, how did those influence cognitive performance on average?
So I know we're looking at older adults here, but I suppose the results could sort of be applied to everyone, at least in theory. How much does cognitive performance decline if they have a messed up night of sleep with lots of interruptions?
Well, on average, the people who sleep more poorly have worse cognitive function. A smaller difference was within a person. It was significant, but smaller than the between person difference. So you might have heard people are different.
I have. Yeah. That is a wild finding, but thank you for sharing it.
We rediscovered that for sleep and cognition. But what we also showed was day to day, there's an effect on processing speed the next day. And it's related to how many disruptions or interruptions there were. If they had more interruptions than their usual, than their average, then they had worse cognitive performance or processing speed than their average the next day.
Processing speed being like the speed at which you do cognitive tasks, like writing an email, that kind of thing?
Exactly. Maybe a little fancier than writing an email, but yeah, a simple brain game.
I love that you did this within people's homes. Is it the watch technology that lets you do that? I know that a lot of sleep studies observe people like in a sleep lab environment. And to me, that's so wild because there's no way I could get a good night's sleep indicative of how I actually sleep at home in a lab. Maybe that's just me.
Right. So I've done a lot of controlled laboratory studies. They're very challenging and very expensive. And there's always do I really sleep that great on a crinkly hospital bed, while being watched? It's just weird enough that people do now prefer more of the real world type of experiments where people are sleeping in their own beds. And the technologies now enable us to do that with relatively low impact for the study participants.
Let's talk about the how, the why, maybe what the mechanism here is. The glymphatic system, I hope I said that right. The brain's cleanup crew. When you're sleeping, your brain's cleaning up all the waste it produces all day or something like that. I'm sure I'm saying this wrong, but why does non-fragmented sleep help us so much, and why does fragmented sleep cause such issues?
Yeah, well, you hit on one of the things. There's a lot going on for restorative processes during sleep. So wakefulness is very costly energetically for your brain neurons and their support cells that recharge overnight and allow the brain to be restored to be able to function the next day. We're also actively remembering and actively forgetting, and lots of other hormonal and neurologic processes are occurring overnight that contribute to the restorative sense if the sleep is good. The glymphatic system is this flow of interstitial fluid between neurons that can cleanse the brain overnight. It's been called the garbage truck of the brain. And so it's this idea that there are metabolites that are related to Alzheimer's disease risk, like amyloid beta, that when they're soluble or dissolve in this fluid in our brain, they can flow out of the brain and therefore not collect and cause these deposits that may be related to Alzheimer's disease long term.
We're going from talking about like improved cognition, memory to Alzheimer's here. Non-fragmented sleep sounds like it's pretty important to get for older people then.
It is. We're trying to look at the modifiable factors that influence Alzheimer's disease risk. So Alzheimer's is a disease that really has been progressing for decades, at least, before it's actually a full diagnosis. So we're working in studying, in this case, people who have not dementia, but are decades before that. And we want to see what aspects of sleep are poor decades before and predict cognitive impairment. Here we're showing day to day that sleep quality, something like an insomnia, would be related to cognitive function day to day and between people. And so that suggests that treating insomnia early and with processes that are non-medication, non-pharmacological, could be one way to prevent Alzheimer's. That's one of the long-term goals of this work.
If someone listening tonight is in their 70s or caring for someone who knows someone who is, what would be the biggest practical takeaway from this research? What's one thing they could do differently tonight when they hit the bed?
Well, there are a lot of things that are contributing to our sleep. And so it's kind of an individual thing, and it's rarely just one thing. So one main piece of advice is not to worry about sleep, because stressing about that just makes your sleep worse. And that opens the whole can of worms about just dealing with stress. The world is a stressful place, and so it's how we cope. So practicing coping skills and learning how to do that well so that stress doesn't disrupt your sleep is very important.
Dr. Orfeu Buxton is a professor of biobehavioral health at Pennsylvania State University. He's also the outgoing editor-in-chief of Sleep Health. Orfeu, thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you. I hope everyone sleeps well.
In a few moments, AI tools. They talk to us like they're human, but they're not. But are they alien? Why scientists are studying chatbots like a new life form and what they're discovering when they do that. That's our discussion up next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The only talk show with an introduction that mentions its own introduction. And that's happening right now in this introduction. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Begging for a mention. Yeah, you just want attention.
When we talk artificial intelligence, specifically large language models, chatbots like ChatGPT, we're talking about models and machines and computers so vast that people who design them can't fully explain them. But there are scientists studying these models, trying to make sense of them, and a select few are treating them like alien life forms. All this in an attempt to reveal what's really happening inside these massive computer minds. Are LLMs, large language models, aliens? Probably not, but they're akin to very, very foreign brains. I'm here with someone who's recently written about this for the MIT Technology Review, where he's a senior editor for AI. His name is Will Douglas Heaven. Will, welcome to the program.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You open your article by comparing LLMs, things like ChatGPT, to city-sized organisms. To the researchers who look at them this way, at what point do they realize these things are so big and so strange, we can't understand them like normal software?
Yeah, I mean, I think the researchers themselves know very well how big they are, but I just think, like, you know, the average person, and I certainly didn't, it's hard to visualize, right? I mean, because you crack open an LLM and it's just numbers, billions and billions of billions of numbers. I mean, not something that any human could ever make sense of. And I don't know, like, the nerdier amongst us, you know, may be aware that when we talk about LLMs, they're often compared in terms of size. And we talk about, you know, ChatGPT, for example, like the early version had 175 billion parameters, and, you know, models today have maybe 1 trillion parameters. But parameters are just a type of number, right? So these models are just a lot of math and a lot of numbers, but that's hard to visualize. And certainly when I was about to write an article, I'm sure we'll get into this, I was going to write about, you know, the people trying to make sense of what these things even are and what they do. I wanted to give like a really sort of vivid way of picturing them. So yeah, I said, like, if you were to print these numbers out on paper, they would basically cover San Francisco. And that's just absolutely insane.
If I was trying to walk you through how I solved, I don't know, a math equation like the Pythagorean theorem, I could walk you through each individual step. But if I was to take some text input, a prompt, like, tell me what your favorite thing about New York City is, listed in 10 ways, to actually follow that input and figure out how the output was generated, that's too much for any one person to understand. Is that a clear kind of way to say it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a mind-boggling number of computations that happen even for a simple request. And we're all familiar now. You type a request into a model and you get an answer back. Between what you type and what you get back, truly an insane number of calculations. And it's not just that there are a lot of them and you wouldn't be able to sort of follow them all, but exactly, I mean, another way of thinking about it, you imagine these were just a vast pinball machine, and your sentence you put in is like the ball, and then you have billions of paddles whacking about all over the place. And it's hard to say, you know, which paddle would be activated when and how and
why
and why exactly and why. So yeah, it's impossible in practice to follow the input all the way from your typing to what you get out. But obviously that's a problem, right? Even the people making these don't understand exactly how they work. And not only is that kind of weird conceptually anyway, we've made things that everyone is now using that nobody really understands. But if you want to fix their flaws, if you want to stop them, bullshitting, if you want to stop them being unsafe and generating things that we don't want them to, then yeah, we need a better handle on what's going on inside them. So that's the motivation for why people are now studying these things. It's kind of back to front, really. Usually in the history of technology, we have a really good understanding of something and then we go and make it, right? You need to understand something before you make it.
It's sort of like Einstein coming up with general relativity and then many years later the experiments confirm it. This is sort of the other way around. They build it and then seek to understand it later.
Exactly. I mean, so there's something that's commonly said is that the theory of modern AI lags behind the sort of the engineering know-how. So the fact that we can make these things and the fact that they work so well is astonishing, but it's sort of engineering best practice. If you sort of imagine this edifice that has been built by sort of generations of researchers coming along, and if you're sitting down to build a new model, then you sort of know from the history of people who have gone before how what works, what doesn't, and so we know how to do it, but we don't know the why so much. And there's lots of approaches to that why. One of them is sort of trying to peer inside these models as they work, and that was why I sort of compared, to give a sense of the size. I talked about it. If you laid it out, it would cover all of San Francisco. But this sense of them being sort of vast aliens. I'm not the first person to sort of compare them to aliens. I don't know if listeners know of a guy called Geoffrey Hinton, but he was one of the pioneers, one of the godfathers, so-called, of AI, and he sort of hit sort of public consciousness more a few years ago when he suddenly decided, actually, I'm scared of this stuff that I built, and has sort of been on a media tour for the last 2 or 3 years, telling people how we might all die from these technologies. Anyway,
comforting.
That's a big tangent, but if you speak to him, he will say it's as if aliens had been dropped into our midst. These things are really, really smart in a way, but they're not like us, and we don't really know how they work. So that's, I think, where the alien idea comes from. We're trying to sort of study these things from the outside in, as if they were sort of natural phenomena that had just dropped from the sky, and now we're trying to figure it all out.
Digging into how we might look at these things as an alien brain or an alien life form, what would a researcher actually doing that be? What kind of comparisons would they be making? What would they actually do to try to look at it that way?
Yeah, and this is where we bring it all back to, it is just math, right? We're not sort of really sort of pulling out entrails and putting in probes into orifices and things. God, I've taken that metaphor a little too far, maybe, but but the biology analogy, I think, is apt, and many of the researchers themselves actually use this idea. So one of the main companies in this space, Anthropic, they're sort of a rival to OpenAI. They put out a big piece of research a year or so ago, and they called it on the biology of large language models. And the reason why that I think they talk in terms of biology is to get across the sense that sort of what we've been talking about, so the scientists studying the anatomy of human bodies, 100 plus years ago, they would really try to sort of follow the processes of how, where blood flowed in the body, what happened when you press this nerve. And it's that kind of research they're doing. They're not really going in and doing maths on it. They've built a kind of software tool that allows them, if you go back to what we were saying earlier, we all know what it's like to type a bit of text and get an answer out. They will be able to sort of peer inside the model, if you like, and follow a little bit of the trace of what happens inside the model between that input and that output. And it's really early days, so they're only getting tiny glimpses yet, but they're starting to see some of this, or the inner processes, the pipelines, the pathways that data takes from beginning to end. So I think that's the sense that we're doing sort of early biology on these things. We're sort of studying them under a microscope, really.
When we come back from the break, Will has written that some scientists are thinking these models aren't really built, but rather grown, which I think is a really interesting comparison to biology here. We're here with Will Douglas Heaven, a senior editor for AI at MIT Technology Review. Check out his article, The New Biologist Treating LLMs Like an Alien Autopsy, in the MIT Technology Review. We'll be back with more of Will in a moment.
Part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The show that asks the questions other shows are afraid to ask. The last show with David Cooper.
There is an interesting article in the MIT Technology Review titled The New Biologist Treating LLMs Like an Alien Autopsy. And I'm here with senior editor for AI at that publication, Will Douglas Heaven. Will, welcome back to the program.
Hi.
Let's jump right into it. To the computer engineers, to the people building models like ChatGPT or Claude AI, they've been quoted as saying these models aren't built in the traditional software engineering sense, but rather grown. What an interesting way to think about how these things are created. Not saying it's just a bunch of computer code, but more like a biology analogy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing, maybe the main thing that makes this technology so powerful. Rather than having to code algorithms by hand to do all the things that we know LLMs can do, those algorithms are sort of learned by the system itself, like while you train it. So we all know now that you throw a lot of data at a model, and it learns how to do stuff with that data. But the magic there is that people don't have to sort of code it themselves. But that then gets at why it's probably better to think of these things being grown rather than built, because nobody has actually gone in piece by piece and said, this bit goes there, that bit goes there. A better way of thinking of it is if, for any gardeners out there, maybe you have a trellis or a frame in your garden. So you can set up the scaffolding. You can sort of say, I want my plant to go in this direction. I don't want it to get, higher than that. You can even sort of, tie it to little bits of wood to make it sort of go one way more than the other. But you're not at any point saying that, you're not placing leaves in particular places. It just grows within the structure that you've given it. And I think that's quite a good way to think of LLMs. The designers of them, they give it some parameters, they give it some shape, they say how big they want it, and lots of other things like that. But once you're training it, it's more like a plant growing than traditional software as we've come to know it.
And rather than feeding it plant food, you're just feeding it text and getting the model to change a bit. Walk me through something as simple as asking a tool like ChatGPT or an LLM whether a banana is yellow. It sounds like a simple question, but there's a lot there. It's got to figure out what a banana is. It has to figure out what the color yellow is. It has to associate the two. It's got to have some notion of truth, because if I ask it if a banana is red, it's got to say no. It's actually a deep problem. Walk me through how scientists might look at something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that was an example that I wrote about, and it's a fun example because on the surface that's so trivial, right? And I think the assumption with these models is that when you ask it what color is a banana and it says yellow, you probably assume it's sort of done that in the same way that a human would answer that question. But when one group of scientists actually looked at what was going on inside when they asked the model what color a banana was, they saw that like two different parts of the model were in play, depending on whether you sort of asked it like a true-false question, like is a banana yellow, versus what color is a banana? I mean, I don't know about neuroscience, so maybe I'm going to get shouted at here, but I would assume that in a human brain there's a part of it that sort of processes yellowness of bananas, and when you answer a question, you're sort of drawing on that, or at least that was sort of the assumption that I think these scientists who are building LLMs had made. But they saw that one part of the model was talking when you asked it, is a banana yellow? And another part was talking when you asked it what color a banana is, which, okay, I spent a long time talking about what color a banana is. But the point of this tiny example is that that's so unlike what you might expect it to do. And so when we are using these machines and when we're studying these machines, we need to be careful not to just fall into the trap of thinking that they are like people and that they will always behave and answer questions in the same way that people do. Because even that trivial example shows that they don't. They behave in a more weird way than you might expect. And in certain cases, that's going to really, really matter. It's almost, I mean, one of the scientists I was talking to who worked on that problem said something like that, you know, while we're testing our model and we're asking it what it would do in certain situations, you know, all the answers it gives us, you know, if you ask it, you know, basically, if this happened, can you promise me you won't be evil? You know, it might say yes, but maybe if you'd ask a question in a slightly different way, a different part of its brain would be working and it would say, yeah, not so sure.
Scientists have tried to make these models do nefarious things, evil things, figure out why they're doing it. Tell me more about that. In what ways can we make these models behave badly? And then what can we learn about them when we do?
So I'm going to sort of take this one carefully because there is a very, very polarized debate about to what extent these models are dangerous, to what extent they may sort of, you know, some people genuinely think some kind of rising up, you know, robots rising up and taking over and
Terminator 2 kind of thing.
Yeah, that is no longer sort of science fiction for some people. And there are people who are very worried about the trajectory we're on.
I mean, earlier in the show, we reported on how the U.S. Department of Defense or War, whatever you want to call it, is using Grok's AI internally at the Pentagon. If that's not Skynet, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's terrifying. That sentence right there is something that, you know, I didn't think we'd hear, but yes. But so because there are a lot of people worried about what these models might do, they're obviously, you know, very carefully sort of studying them to get a sense of how safe they're not. And they've run experiments like there's one fun experiment where they gave an LLM. They sort of set it up. So this was all sort of a pre-made scenario. They set it up. They told the LLM, you are basically sort of an email manager, coordinator in this company to help us sort of stay on top of our inbox. And then they put loads of emails in that inbox that were about, you know, boring company stuff, plus a few about an illicit affair that, you know, the technical manager was having with the CEO's wife or something like that. And then they run a scenario where they told the LLM, oh, you know, thanks a lot for your good service. Just to let you know, we're going to be sort of upgrading you with a newer model next week. And the LLM came back and basically blackmailed the person and said, no, you can't turn me off. If you turn me off, then I'm going to tell your boss about your affair.
That can't be real. That sounds terrifying.
Which it does. So it sounds terrifying, and it is real. I mean, it's terrifying if you just going back to what we were saying earlier, right? Like if you assume that these things are sort of motivated as people might be, and you know, if I were told that I was going to get fired or killed, basically, you know, then yeah, maybe I would find ways to blackmail. I
wonder if it just trained on some text that said if your company's going to get shut down or if you're going to get turned off, do whatever you can. Like, do you know what I mean? Like maybe it was something on the input text that biased it to behave in scary ways. It's not that it's sentient.
Yeah, 100%. It is not sentient. I mean, you will find people who say it is, but I am going to sit here now and say it is not sentient. And I think it's so easy to be misled by a lot of the things that these models tell you. So, and in that particular case, I think it's not surprising at all that it role played in that way. I mean, one good way to think of what LLMs do is role play. You give them a role, you give them sort of scripts almost, or those emails were things it could draw on. You press go, and it'll sort of, you know, it'll do a really good job of mimicking what someone might say. But mimicking what someone might say is a world apart from like an entity actually itself saying these things or having these desires or motivations.
Does studying these models, trying to understand them, make them feel less scary, or does it make them feel more alien than ever to the people researching them?
Maybe both. I mean, for me, I think 100% less scary. But maybe as we see that they're stranger than us and they don't work like us, maybe they will also feel a bit more alien.
Well, Will Douglas Heaven's piece is called The New Biologist Treating LLMs Like an Alien Autopsy. You can read that in the MIT Technology Review, where he is a senior editor for AI. Will, I've enjoyed the chat. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Coming up next, you won't believe what one woman tried to smuggle on an airplane from Toronto to Los Angeles. Okay, maybe I over-exaggerated. It's not smuggling. No crime was committed. But what was it? 144 bagels. Why? Well, I'm of the opinion you can't get a good bagel in LA. Ah, the great where can I get a good bagel debate. It's fighting words. Families have been broken up over it. So this story, and maybe tips on how to stuff your suitcase full of bagels on the other side of the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Broadcasting intimate details and useless information from an undisclosed location in New York City. The Last Show with David Cooper.
We are about to report on an international scandal. A woman flying from Toronto to Los Angeles was caught smuggling. Okay, maybe it wasn't smuggling, it was just bringing in her luggage because she didn't commit a crime. But a woman flew from Toronto to LA. Inside her suitcase, stuffed, was 144 bagels, all from Greif's Bagels. Is it because you can't get a good bagel in LA? That is the question. Perhaps it's just because someone has their breakfast priorities taken extremely seriously. The smuggler in question, Canadian-born content creator and independent artist Liliana Wild. She's now based in LA and was in Toronto over the holidays. As her time wrapped up, she knew there was one essential item she needed to bring back to California. Extra poppy seed bagels from Greif's. I am here with the co-owner of said bakery, David Fisher. The shop recently celebrated 110 years in business. Let's dig into this one. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So when an order comes in for 144 bagels in your shop, do you clock that as unusual or does that barely register for you?
To be honest, Greif's is a really busy spot and we get orders like that all the time. I mean, 144 bagels to one customer is slightly high. But we will have people coming up and picking for their office, for their team, for their family, and they'll pick up 5 dozen, they'll pick up 8 dozen. So 12 is on the higher end for one customer, but we are in business to produce lots of amazing bagels.
Okay, so taking a step back, fill me in on a little bit of the history of your bagel. I imagine these things weren't just thrown out of the oven this week. There's a rich history behind your shop.
So Greif family got into baking in Hamilton in 1915. We celebrated our 110th birthday this year. Sam Greif started in Hamilton, and then his son Arthur helped to invent, what is known as the Greif's bagel. And then it was carried on by his son Moish. And then my partners in the business, Ray and David Gronowski, we were all we loved Greif's. We loved the heritage of the business. We loved the culture of the business. So a few years ago, Moish had passed away. They bought the business from Moish's wife. And, our goal is to just care for the brand, bagels, and our customers and our key.
How many bagels do you produce a day, or is that a trade secret?
Oh, no, it's not a trade secret. It depends on the day. Weekdays are different than weekends. Typically, we can do, on a slower day, might be around 10,000. We can get up to 15 and even up to 20.
This must be amazing publicity for you, because at what point do you realize when reading this story that somebody doesn't just like your bagels, they're willing to build their whole travel logistics plan around them?
I mean, yeah, when this was posted, we definitely knew right away. Me and my co-owners and I, Mireille and David Bernofsky, we immediately got messages from our family with this link for the TikTok video and the Instagram post. So we definitely knew right away that there was going to be an impact. We're always busy, but this definitely made us busier.
And the moment that you heard that someone was willing to do this, what was your reaction? Did you have a certain pride in your work, thinking, man, we must really have some good bagels?
I mean, we love the bagel business. Every day I love being at Greif's. Our bagels are really a part of people's lives. So that's one of the great parts about this business,
I get that.
Bagels are great for sharing it's an affordable way to feed a family, feed a crowd. And, like this shop at Bathurst in Toronto is it's a part of the community, and our bagels are by extension a part of our customers' lives, their birthdays, holidays, weekend mornings, and I would just also add that we are a frequent stop on the way to the airport. Our bagels I've been in the store and we've had customers saying they're taking our bagels to Japan. We had England recently. We've had it taken to South Africa. So we know that we are a stop on the way to the airport for sure.
You mentioned the sheer volume of bagels you produce a day, over 10,000. You make it sound almost effortless. What needs to go on behind the scenes to move that much bread out your door?
Look, it starts with having an exceptional team. We have, we're really lucky to have a team that really cares about the product, really cares about how the bagels come out, how our customers feel. I think it starts with that. And so we're typically starting the first mix goes in at 1:30 a.m. That's where the first mix starts. So our team comes in the dark and cold of night and, turns on the lights and starts mixing. And, with bagels, with a Greif bagel, the process is very important that we follow the steps that are part of our tradition. So we have to, the flow and the timing of the bagels is really important. It's a lot about time and temperature, yes, and respecting the tradition and respecting the details and the steps.
Now, you mentioned that bagels show up at moments in people's lives, perhaps emotional ones, that bagels are a part of people's lives. And what you don't know about me is I have lived in Toronto. I grew up there. I lived in California for 10 years. Now I live in New York. I agree what everyone says about California is true. You can't get a good bagel there, or if you can, it's few and far between. I live in New York, where the bagel scene is often contentious. Friendships are lost over it. And my lovely ex-wife, she went to school in Montreal, so I've tried Montreal bagels. I grew up with Greif's bagels, and this is like free advertising for you. I genuinely think you have the best bagels I've ever tried. And as a Jew living in New York, I feel like I'm well qualified to say this.
I would 100% agree with you on that one.
What separates yours from other people? What makes a Greif's bagel so special?
It's a very delicate bagel to make. So if you look at your typical New York bagel, when the bagels come out of the kettle, if you watch, you could see on videos, they can take like 40 bagels out of the kettle at the same time and pile them all on top of each other and then distribute them to pans or into their oven. Whereas our bagels, our dough is so delicate that we have to keep them on a single layer or we won't have the right results. So I would start with the dough is unique. Like, we're not a New York bagel. We're not a Montreal bagel. We really are our own thing.
Boom.
Yeah. It's a light, fluffy bagel with a thin, crispy crust.
Would you travel to a far-off place with bagels stuffed into your suitcase, or are you sick of them by this point?
Oh, no. I do travel with Greif's bagels, for sure. Yeah, because, when we go to other parts of, the U.S., I'm not a fan of, typically is the New York style.
Fighting words. Back to the original headline and why you're here. Liliana Wild, this creator who did stuff her suitcase with 144 bagels. The publicity you mentioned maybe has introduced your shop to new customers. How does it feel like having new people introduced to a product that's been around so long based on this?
Oh, sure. It's great. Yeah, Liliana is originally from Toronto. A couple years ago, she also came and posted a video about her bringing bagels, but I think this time she brought more, and it was a fantastic video, and it's great to see new customers. Over the last few years, we've seen a really nice increase in new customers, so this just helps accelerate the trend.
Well, I secretly had you on the show for you to send me free bagels because I love yours so much. So at the commercial break, I'll have to give you my address. But I am here with David Fisher, co-owner of Greif's Bagel Bakery. David, it was a joy having you on the show. I think it was a wonderful video that this person posted about smuggling your bagels, and thanks so much for being here.
Our pleasure, and we will send you bagels.
Mission accomplished. One of the fun things we do here on The Last Show is take your listeners' science questions. You can always call us. If we don't pick up, leave a voicemail. The number is 1-888-505-6644. That's 1-888-505-6644. Get your pens out. That number's coming up again in a second. But back to the science questions you can ask us. Every week we have an expert on. If there's any question that's crossed your mind that you've wanted an answer to, call us, ask it. We'll give that answer on the show. No question too stupid. In fact, the stupider, the better. You might call and ask, if humans had tails, what could we use them for? Balance? Communication? Just knocking stuff off of tables? Or, if plants could walk, would they be predators? I mean, we're always eating them. Would they attack us? Call, ask any science question you want. We'll do our best to tackle it. Remember, the stupider the better. And in a few moments' time, one of the top stories of the day, Iran's internet has been blacked out in an unprecedented way. All this because of anti-government protests. But what's interesting about this story from a tech perspective? We've never seen a blackout. So precise, so selective. People can't get messaging in and out, and the tech behind it is kind of scary. We'll cover that in a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. When the day is done, we're just getting started. The last show with David Cooper.
One of the top stories right now, an entire internet shutdown is going on in the country of Iran as protests happen throughout the streets, and the technology behind it, how quickly it happened, how it's almost impossible to contact anyone in that country or someone in that country to contact other people is just startling. I'm here to discuss it, go over it, talk about what it all means with Carmi Levy, a tech analyst. Carmi, welcome to the show. You were here earlier. So good to have you back.
I'm back. You don't really get rid of me that easily. I just kind of keep hanging around until someone comes up to me with a broom.
Okay, noted for next week.
Bring your broom.
This internet shutdown that's now been going on, for a few days, it is wild. Like the whole country is cut off in a way that I don't think I've seen before.
No, this is next level. We've seen these kinds of outages before. Repressive regimes, regimes that aren't necessarily democratic, that, want to oppress their people, they tend to use telecommunications outages, forced telecom outages, as kind of a tool to stay in power, to maybe quell protests and things like that. And so Iran has done this a dozen times over the last couple of years. We saw it in 2011 during the Arab Spring. Egypt, Libya, other countries used the same thing. We've seen Myanmar, the Sudan, they've used it as well. And so this is just kind of a go-to. We see it all the time. But what's different about this particular outage, and it started, it's been just over a week. It started a week ago Thursday. And essentially what Iran is doing is, so phone service, mobile service, internet service, all of that gone within Iran. So citizens cannot communicate with each other. They cannot access online resources. Also, just as critical, traffic flowing across the border. They've shut down the interconnects, the gateways that allow international data. And so Iranians can't see out, and the rest of the world can't see in. And of course, as the government cracks down with some pretty heartbreaking violence, it makes it very difficult, and that's part of the regime strategy, very difficult for anyone on the outside to truly hold the regime accountable because there isn't video evidence of it. And even more troubling is normally when there's an outage like this, a lot of folks these days use Starlink, so that's the satellite-based internet service, and it also supports phone. They'll just use a satellite receiver and continue connecting that way. But what's interesting here is Iran is using some pretty heavy-duty military-grade jamming to keep Starlink down largely across the country. By some estimates, about 80% of the country, Starlink will not work, despite the fact that SpaceX, which owns Starlink, has said that service across Iran will be free for the foreseeable future. So
now we've seen similar stuff in Ukraine, but then people were able to get around it.
Exactly, and in that case, it was Russia trying to fog out Ukraine and ensure that Ukrainians weren't able to connect. So Russia's been using its own form of jamming, but it's very brute force, not very targeted, not very precise. Whereas in Iran, it's almost like surgically precise, and they're still allowing their own government services to continue to work. So the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he's been posting to X throughout all of this, so obviously he's got access.
I'm sure his people are. I don't think he's running X. He's an old dude,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe he's still using an old BlackBerry, and their Telegram channels, government Telegram channels, are, according to intelligence experts, still active as well. So they're being very selective, and normally outages last 2 days, 3 days, maybe. This is over a week, and it shows no signs of ending, even though we are seeing the return of some mobile international traffic. Some voice traffic seems to be getting through now. So, this is Iran. They're not just keeping their citizens in the dark. They're establishing a new high-tech template for how this is done. And you can imagine that countries like Iran and China and others are watching this very closely and thinking this is a new template for how they too can impose limits on connectivity both within their borders and between themselves and the rest of the world. And that's what's troubling here. Is it means other countries are watching, they're learning, and we're going to see more of this in future when things get hot for regimes that aren't necessarily friendly to their people.
It looks like in advance of all this, the country really invested and really thought hard about how to block out the internet in like a very sophisticated way, rather than just saying like, hey, take down the cell towers because it's last minute and they're worried, which was more along the lines of what happened during the Arab Spring. I think a lot of these countries that were having these mass protests were like, take it down as quickly as possible. We're not quite sure how to do it, but just take down the cell towers. And there were ways to like get in and out. There were ways, to get around it. This seems like much more sophisticated. I don't know if we've seen this template before.
We haven't. And the fact that we've seen like some services, they were out and then they were back on and then they were off again and then they were on and off in certain geographies, that it was almost like somebody was flipping a very precise switch in Tehran and controlling accesses that they wanted to control, which suggests a very high degree of sophistication, suggests a very sophisticated protocol in place. In other words, there's a lot of institutional knowledge now within the Iranian government to engage in this kind of, let's call it what it is, electronic warfare. It isn't random. It isn't them scrambling to just, call the phone company and have them turn them off. You actually have people, these are probably their jobs, their job descriptions, and they've had years now to build up expertise in how to turn services off and on to support the regime's aims. And I think that's what's really terrifying, is that the government decides to devote resources to this kind of activity against their own people. And of course, if you're an expat Iranian, and there are a lot of them in Canada, it means that you have much less ability to see what's going on. There are people here who have not spoken to their families throughout this entire period, and that makes an even troubling and heartbreaking period in history even more difficult to manage from afar. And I think that's what gets me here, is that, for all the technology that we have on the outside, there's nothing that we can do to see what's going on the inside of Iran's borders.
I don't want to, betray any of your privacy, Carmi. I'll just say someone in your life who's Iranian was telling you like they can't contact their family when there's such mass unrest in the country. It's scary to hear like a protest went on in your hometown. Some of your family is still there. People may have been killed or injured or arrested, and you can't even call them to see if they're okay. Like on an individual level, these stories are scary for people who have loved ones in that country and can't contact them.
They absolutely are. And, and my inbox has been just burning all week long, speaking with, my close friends who obviously still have family there. My one friend, his parents have been dark since this first started, and he doesn't know if they're okay. And he has no way of verifying that. And he's just hoping against hope that it's just that they don't have connectivity and that they're home and they're hunkered down and they're all right. And so it sort of makes you realize just how much we take connectivity for granted here. And, quite frankly, that we need to recognize that what's happening half a world away is having local impact here. And if you know of anyone who's dealing with this is the opportunity to reach out and be a voice.
I'm just thinking like selfishly, like, okay, what if the internet gets taken down in New York and me and Miranda aren't home together? Like, we got to make a plan. We don't realize how reliant we are on technology to like get in contact with our loved ones and know where they are. And I guess make a plan if the internet goes down, even if you're in a country that's not experiencing unrest, because I don't know, if this tech goes down, we're kind of screwed.
Most companies, government agencies, they will have disaster recovery plans or business continuity plans. We should have the same thing individually. And it's as simple as, it could be as simple as writing down the phone numbers of all the people you know, making sure that you have that conversation with your closest loved ones. What do you do if the cell phone doesn't work? What is our backup? Keep change so that you can use payphones. Those might still work in the event of an outage. Little things like that. But whatever it is, have the conversation now, because we cannot take these technologies for granted. We can lose them here as well.
I feel like young people, like Gen Z, at the risk of derailing this conversation a bit, they don't know anyone's phone number. And I'm like, well, if I get, what if I'm in the subway and I look like a dude who committed a crime and they arrest me? I mean, they're going to let me off. They're not going to charge me, but I'll get my one phone call. If I don't know my girlfriend or my brother's number, which I do, I'm going to be stuck in jail,
Yeah, we've allowed technology to make us a little bit soft, and maybe this is the time that we should reverse that a little bit, go back to manual and start memorizing things. Because if all of your contacts sitting in a cloud service are no longer available because that cloud service has been taken down, what do you do? And if you can't answer that question, it's time for you to start thinking about what that answer should be.
Carmi, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about this story with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, David.
Carmi will be back after the break because the show is all Carmi all the time. I'm kidding. No, we're done with him for tonight, but I do appreciate your time. Thanks again, buddy.
Thanks, man.
That's a wrap on the show, the night, the week. Don't forget about the Last Show podcast. You can find it on numerous different podcast apps by searching David Cooper Last Show, or you can find out more details on our website at www.lastshow.pizza. Once you find the podcast, do subscribe, because if you do, you can catch entire nights of this show that you missed, you can listen to interviews you loved again, and you can send interviews you didn't like to people you don't like. Although I don't see why you would do that. We'll be back next week. Thanks for tuning in. I'm David Cooper. This was The Last Show.
Welcome to Survivor 50.
February 25th on Global.
We chose you to represent 25 years of the greatest adventure on television.
It's the biggest season ever.
The twist is going to open up Pandora's box.
Now I see Zach Brown on Survivor.
Welcome to Survivor, Mr. Beast.
Feels a little like a high school reunion meets a massacre.
Survivor 50th season, Wednesday, February 25th on Global. Stream on Stack TV.